everybody, welcome back to another Farming Simulator 22 how-to video. Today we're going to complete our kind of two-part series on planters and seeders by taking a look at all of the base game planters and seeing how they behave on the various soil types. So we have seedbed, plowed ground, cultivated ground, and stubble tillage. And then we have cultivated and stubble tillage a few more times across this field because of the various implements that we used to kind of set this field up for this particular test. Then at the end of the field, we have a section that is completely unharvested. And we're just going to kind of use this as a final comparison as to if there are any planters that we can use, basically no-till or direct plant into harvested soil. But before that, this video is brought to you by Bandit 2015. Thank you for being a farm baron. So the whole reason for this video is somewhat based on my revisit of subsoilers, where we had a subsoiler, and then I added to the back of the subsoiler this little 4-meter planter. And oddly enough, this planter did not plant in stubble tillage, which I thought was really, really odd. So I thought, you know what? Let's see if there are planters that don't work in various soil types. So I'm pretty darn sure I had that planter turned on in that particular video. Now, if we take a look up here, this is how we got this field in this particular state. I have plowed section. I use the largest in-game plow to plow. I have a plowed section. I use the largest in-game plow to plow up this section. This area right here, which is in a cultivated state, I used a spader to produce this. Here we have stubble tillage, and it is the end result of using the 8-meter agrosim off there in the distance. We have cultivated ground once again as a result of the Kuhn subsoiler. Stubble tillage once again as a result of the power harrow. Cultivated ground again as a result of using a cultivator. Stubble tillage as a result of using a shallow cultivator, and as a result of using a disc harrow. So that is how all of these kind of bands of soil state have occurred. Now, if you haven't seen any other of the videos, specifically the seeding video, and then I did do another video on the soil rollers, the field rollers, you won't realize or you won't know about this interesting aspect that seems to happen if you overlap a implement that does cultivation and an implement that does stubble tillage. And what we end up with is this area of seedbed. Basically the same thing we get with a roller. So let's take a look at our various soil types here in the field. So we have plowed, pretty expected, cultivated, stubble tillage, and then we have seedbed. And we have seedbed up here where we rolled. I rolled this down here, but we also have seedbed here, here, and here. And that is where I had a little bit of an overlap between the shallow cultivator and the cultivated ground. I had a little bit of overlap between the Coon subsoiler and the Power Harrow. And I had a little bit of overlap between the Spader and the AgroSim subsoiler. And that somehow produced seedbed. So just wanted to point that out also. So let's go ahead and jump in our first planter. And what we're going to do is we're going to run it across the rolled seed bed first. And then we're going to bring it across the various soil states. And we're just going to see if this planter does indeed work across all those soil states or not. So I've turned it on. Let's go to it. So there we are, planting on our seed bed. If you haven't seen the planted state, it is a different visual state than a seeded state in Farm Sim 22. See, our seed count is going down. So we are definitely putting seed into the ground. And you'll see as we move across here, we are getting nothing in particular happening on the harvested soil. Let's take it across our stubble tillage. We are losing seed. Now that is interesting. It wasn't working behind the Coon, not the Coon, an AgroSim subsoiler. But it is working here. Quite interesting indeed. We're in our cultivated and then our plowed ground. Should work as expected. We'll hop into our next planter, which is the Amazon. Would help if we turned it on. All of these planters typically take fertilizer also. Some of them will take solid fertilizer. I believe some of the bigger ones are going to end up taking liquid fertilizer. But you can see we are successful in planting across all of the soil types until we get to harvested, and then at that point we're no longer successful. So we do have growing across all of these, but not here at harvested. Growing in corn. Now, interesting, the unique planted texture here on the cultivated soil is not continued here on stubble tillage. We go back to kind of a seeded state for the stubble tillage. Moved on to the Coon planter, and it is planting as expected. Now the planters, interesting enough, they are behaving as I would expect as we move across the various soil textures here. Whereas in the seeding video, you saw that once we kind of entered the stubble tillage, we put down a kind of a no-till texture across the rest of the field, regardless of what type of soil type we were in. But the planters here seem to be obeying and putting down the proper planted or stubble seeded texture. A few more to go. Overall, I would say that we're getting the results that I would have expected, which is different than what we saw on the cedar video also. We got some results that I wasn't expecting on the cedar video. That is most assuredly something that is interesting. The planters are working better, in my opinion, than cedars are. So we continue to move up the kind of the vehicle product stack here, the implement product stack. But I really don't know why we couldn't plant directly behind a AgroSim subsoiler. That was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting indeed. Here we have the Kinsey planter. One of the newest planters in game. And it does not take fertilizer whatsoever, it's just seed. And that is unique right there. The Kinsey is a no-till style planter because we just, for the very first time, was able to plant over our harvested ground. Let's see if that continues. As we move into the, I believe this is a Vanderstand planter. Now, no-till planting is a fairly common thing here in the States. It may not be common in Europe, given the various differences in soils, but it is something that we do see here in the States quite a bit. So the Vanderstand does not plant over harvested ground. It may be the two Kinseys do. I don't know. We'll have to see. Now we have another new addition to Farm Sim in the big John Deere planter here. It also only accepts seed. We are indeed planting across all of the various soil types at this point. And now the question is, harvested ground? Yes, it does. John Deere will allow you to plant across harvested ground also. one more test, and then we're going to take a look at all these in the shop. Because I got so excited to do the testing, I didn't look at them in the shop earlier. Now this one will take liquid fertilizer on top of its seed. We are planting again across all of the worked soil types. Will it be the third? Yes, it will be. So the two Kinseys and the big John Deere are the only base game planters that can plant directly over harvested soil and therefore act as a sort of no-till planter. Let's take a look at these in the shop. Tools, planters, and we have the Agrimaz Falcon 3. All of these are going to plant pretty much the same product. Corn, soybean, sunflowers, sugar beets, and cotton. With the Amazon 4500 2C. We have the Kuhn Maxima 3 till. It says till even though it doesn't no-till, which is kind of interesting. Limkin Azurt 9. Equivalent Optima RS. Now we move on to the Kinsey. And interesting, the Kinsey doesn't even tell you up here it has that no-till capability. It just says planters are special types of seeders. Okay. We have the Tempo L16. John Deere. Now, this one does. It says, additionally, the seeder offers the possibility to seed directly. But the Kinsey, we noted, did this and didn't say that. And then the Kinsey here, again, it clearly does it, but it doesn't say it in the shop. So if you just went off the shop, you would be boasting about how the John Deere is superior in every way because it allows no-till. Not realizing you were showing your ignorance and not fully realizing the Kinseys, the pair of them, also did allow no-till planting, as we have right here. Kinsey, John Deere, the other Kinsey. So as we have with our other tests, I am now going to advance forward 22 hours to 9 a.m. in September. And we're going to take a look at seed growth across all of the various soil types, or field work types, and planters. So as we can see now, it's September, we have weed growth on our cornfields. And clearly it looks like we have a lot of weeds in our stubble tillage areas and in our areas of direct planting, our no-till on the harvested areas. It feels like we have less weeds here in our cultivated ground, as is the words of the tutorials. Stubble tillage again feels much more dense, but also you'll see that here we have tracks where we drove our tractor, where we don't have the weeds. Interesting enough, for the big P9, we're not seeing that across any of the others. Makes you wonder. Makes you kind of wonder. The fact that we're only seeing the tire tracks on the T9 Now we saw tire tracks up here when I did a rolled video. And in fact, you can still see them. Right there, you can see the tire tracks where we drove over here with a roller. 1, 2. Feels like there should be more tracks there, but 3. And then here we can see tire tracks with the T9 clearly. Clearly. Let's go to the weed layer. Clearly, look, tire tracks. Tire tracks. Could there be something related to compaction hidden somewhere in the code that's not activated yet? Because, yeah, that's very interesting. But we're getting what we expected, right? We're getting a lot of weeds in stubble tillage, a lot of weeds in direct plant, less weeds in cultivated ground, and no weeds at all here on plowed ground, which we expect. I don't think we're supposed to get weeds for spaded ground, but that's for another day. And as we have seen already, stubble tillage doesn't appear to produce any weeds until you do something else with it. Now we're going to go ahead and move forward yet another day and see how things progress. So we've moved forward another day. We still have this clean delineation behind these tires of no weeds. Still have that clean delineation. It's rather interesting. Weeds, where we have stubble tillage, kind of taller, more flowered. Weeds here, where we don't have, where we had the cultivated, they feel more plentiful now than they were before, but I think that's just because more weeds have grown in under here. So we have weeds of different, maybe growth state, possibly. Whereas here we have more weeds that are either small or tall here. But overall, it's still the same thing that we would expect. As we saw in the planting and the seeding video, if I come in here with a sprayer, we're going to be able to spray this. And areas that we have nothing planted, for whatever reason, when we spray it, nothing happens. But we really don't need to worry about that because the act of planting or seeding prepared soil will basically erase the weeds that are there. They'll come back, but the weeds that are there will go away. So here we have our weeds where we had the rolled seed bed, and again our stubble tillage, our cultivated ground. Cultivated ground without plants in it seems to produce weeds. Where we had stubble tillage, and even where we had stubble tillage and later rolled, we don't have weed growth for whatever reason until we plant. And of course, plowed ground is the key to never having any weeds in your field, is to come in here and plow, and then you won't ever have to worry about any weeds as your crops grow per harvest. Now, if we harvest this and don't plow, then we'll get weeds back. So guys, that is kind of a little bit more of an abbreviated look, a little bit quicker than our seeding video was, with respect to how each and every planter works. And what we're learning is the two Kinseys will direct plant. The John Deere will direct plant, but only the John Deere says it will direct plant in the shop. And all of this was done on version 1.1.1.0 of the game. Some of this may change. For example, descriptions may get updated in an update. Possibly other behaviors might get updated in an update with respect to weed growth and such. But that is what we're seeing as of the creation of this video. So guys, I want to thank you for coming out and watching today's video. If you've got any questions or comments related to what you saw here today, please go ahead and put them down in the comments below. I try to read as many comments as I can. I try to respond to as many comments as I can, but occasionally there will be things that will definitely get slipped by. But overall, I hope this video was helpful, useful, and ultimately entertaining in some way. And until next time, happy farming.